Hello, everyone. I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, this was one of those weeks when the New Orleans Police Department's mission was more intense than usual. By Thursday, there were some results as 2 suspects in a drive-by shooting were arrested. Better justice and education are part of the answer, but in the same week, a juvenile court judge was under indictment, and there is new debate about the structure of schools, both public and Catholic. We'll be discussing these stories tonight, plus new developments in next year's lieutenant governor's race and relocating the homeless. On the ballot for us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Richard Webster, reporter, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, Danielle Drellinger, reporter, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, and Mike Perlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4 Eyewitness News. And we're going to start off with Mike. More shooting incidents, drive-by shooting, just so tragic. People killed, 2 little children, badly injured. And then also a cop shooting that we didn't hear about for a couple of days. What a week.
Yeah, that's enough for some cities for a month or even a year. And here in New Orleans, that happened in the space of a few days. Just to put it in a little historical perspective, you know, New Orleans has had a notoriously high murder rate, sometimes leads the nation per capita. There have been small signs of improvement in the last couple of years, but it's shootings like this where indiscriminate shootings take the lives or gravely wound completely innocent victims. That's bad enough. But when it's a 2-year-old left with permanent brain damage, a 4-year-old permanently blinded, those seem to stand apart in just the, you know, horror and revulsion. It gets a very strong community reaction. Now, the flip side, if there is any silver lining, is it does get enough people outraged that Crime Stoppers tips come pouring in usually, and they did in this case. It was Crime Stopper tips that led to the identity and the very quick arrest of 2 men, one the shooter and another alleged accomplice, alleged shooter, alleged accomplice. You know, we'll see how that all plays out in court. Police are still looking for a 3rd suspect. But this is just, once again, a reminder of, you know, so many things that are, you know, almost intractable problems in this city, which is, you know, the crime problem, number 1, but the police department's inability to get a handle on this. Just when you think you've turned a corner, you know, as the Landry administration, the police department were sort of celebrating 2 straight years of a decrease in the murder rate. Things like this, you know, it just brings back the cascade of the Mother's Day second line shooting and 19 people killed, and it's the, you know, those innocent victims.
19 people shot, not killed.
I mean, 19 people shot. Fortunately, no fatalities in that one.
But somebody seriously injured.
But 2 years ago, Breonna Allen on, you know, a porch at a birthday party.
Way too many. And in this instance, in this drive-by shooting, the police say that it was more drug than gang-related. I mean, what's the distinction there?
There's really very little distinction in New Orleans. I mean, a New Orleans-style gang really is just a, you know, small sort of, you know, informally linked group of people who, you know, are involved in crime together, usually coming from a neighborhood or family connections. In this case, there does appear to be an intended target. One of the 2 people killed. There was actually another shooting that seems to be linked to this one. So in classic New Orleans fashion, when there's a shooting, the street usually takes care of justice before police can get there, and in a form of retaliation. So it just falls into that very stubborn pattern, which I know that, you know, Mayor Mitch Landry is making this his top priority. But one of the problems that we're really seeing now, quite starkly, is that the police department, it's not just, you know, undermanned in general, but in being able to sort of get a handle on the retaliation shootings. You know, if you talk to people on the street, they know who's responsible, who's behind this. But if you don't have the police officers to step in, to go to hot spots, you're going to see this over and over again.
Yeah.
Mike, at the press conference yesterday, Police Chief Surpass was outraged that both of these people had a record. Both of these people have been arrested before, yet they're out on the streets again. Why are they still out on the streets?
Well, that's an issue that it's been examined quite a bit, and generally speaking, for one, carrying a gun is a misdemeanor in this town, and I know that that's a red flag for police, but they tend to draw low bonds. And those other things, while a rap sheet may look lengthy, possession of marijuana, criminal damage, possession of stolen property, and yes, carrying of an illegal weapon. You add all those up, and it seems like, wow, what is this guy doing on the street? But taken individually, the bond for those is $5,000 less, easily, affordable, and we just don't generally keep people locked up indefinitely on those kind of charges.
And before we run out of time, I want you to also comment on the cop shooting that happened a couple of days without anybody really knowing about it.
Yeah, as if it wasn't a bad enough week for the police department. There was a police shooting in which a suspect was grazed in the head, enough to send him to the hospital for a few days, but somehow the public, and through the media, the public was not notified that the police shot anyone. And these are the kinds of incidents that are usually reported right away.
Right.
And for a whole 2 days to go by, and when the item was mentioned in this rundown of police items, it was simply that a officer needed assistance and was suffered a minor wound to her hand. That seemed a little disingenuous to a lot of people, and fortunately, Chief Surpass stepped out right away,
and apologized.
Gave a full account and apologized, said that the fact that was not reported was a mistake, something fell through the cracks.
And also he transferred the mayor's spokesperson, Gamble.
Right.
I'm forgetting his.
Well, Tyler Gamble, who was with the city,
Yeah.
He basically fills a vacuum because the New Orleans Police Department has been without a head public information officer.
So now he's there with NOPD.
That's right. So
Okay,
hopefully we won't have any more police shootings go unreported.
Falling through the cracks. Thanks, Mike. Danielle, we are hearing now about what the Archdiocese wants its schools to do. It's sort of changing its structure, and it's impacted now. Christian Brothers and St. Anthony Padua School are merging. How is that going to come about? How's that going to work?
So the details of that particular merger are not, the schools didn't have many details yet. The overall structure here is that the Archdiocese announced back over the winter that they were going to demand a unified grade structure for all of its schools. And so all the schools would have to be either pre-K to 7 or 8 to 12 or pre-K to 12. And there were 37 of the 80 schools didn't fit that model. But in most cases, they were just one grade or maybe 2 grades off. And the big, Christian Brothers was the school that people looked at and said, what on earth are they going to do? Because it's a standalone middle school. It's grades 5 through 7. So they could close down, they could add tons more, they could add lower grades, and they're on this landlocked campus in City Park, so they can't expand where they are. And so they announced this week that they were going to be merging with St. Anthony of Padua. So what this is going to look like, it's going to be a dual campus school, and it's going to maintain the single-sex middle school part. So grades 5 through 7, all boys are going to be on the Christian Brothers campus, and Christian Brothers are going to run the whole endeavor. And girls in those grades are going to be on the St. Anthony campus, and there's going to be a combined co-ed pre-K to 4 program also at St. Anthony.
Why is the Archdiocese feeling that this restructuring was needed? We take a look at a school, particularly like Christian Brothers. It's been an extremely popular school in this community, and it takes boys from all over the metro area, so why make these changes structurally in all of these schools? Why did the Archdiocese feel it needed to do that?
Well, this is part of a national movement that's in response really to the decline in Catholic school enrollment nationwide, which has been very significant and certainly significant in New Orleans. And a study came out of Catholic University about 3-4 years ago that found, for whatever reason, that unifying the grade sequence was going to make the schools stronger. Maybe because everyone transfers at one point. There's not a question of people leaving their elementary, middle schools to go to Christian Brothers in 5th grade. It's never been really, frankly, clear to me why that has been seen as the solution, but it is one of the solutions that they see.
And so some of the schools have had to add grades, like Holy Cross, for example.
Right, so Holy Cross announced earlier this year that they were going to add a whole set of lower grades, and it's a grades 5 through 12 school. So it's a really big endeavor. They have to be pre-K to 4 at 6 years. Like, that's a really and it's expensive. And St. Benedict More is also trying to expand in the other direction. They're pre-K to 4 now, but they're looking for the money to do that. And the other school that we don't know about yet is St. Aug, which, one of my coworkers wrote earlier this year that like the Fighting 100 could be cut down to like the Fighting 82. But they've had to file their plan, but they haven't yet announced what they're going to do.
So 2016 is the target date for all of these changes to be made?
It depends, because the schools that have more grades to add or lose are given more time to comply, which makes sense.
I remember, it's more than just religion. I remember a long time ago a priest at St. Aug telling me that the school was right on the edge of Gentilly, and once Eastern New Orleans opened and there was more and more development, and especially as the black community started to develop out there in the suburban area, a lot of those students were lost to the neighborhood. Those were in the early days of St. Aug. The students used to walk to school, okay, and then you were getting fewer of those now, and so the demographics really changed.
Well, we'll be watching this closely up to 2016. That's a lot of changes for these schools. It'll be interesting to see how all of this works out, particularly in the Christian Brothers St. Anthony merger.
Right, and they were saying that they felt it was going to be a really strong move for both schools.
Thanks a lot, Danielle. Richard, over to you right now. We saw this week that the city really stepped in with these homeless encampments underneath the interstate, particularly, and just moved everybody out, but not everybody necessarily is moving.
Well, they all moved. So it was underneath the Pontchartrain Expressway between South Claiborne and St. Charles. There was about 140 people, a lot of tents, became a whole public health hazard. There's no bathrooms out there. So the city moved in on Monday around 8 p.m. They gave them 72-hour notice to leave. City came Thursday morning and just got everyone out of there.
But where do they go?
So there's actually 140, and there was 3 main shelters: the New Orleans Mission, the Ozanam Inn, and the Salvation Army. So between those 3, there was enough beds to take in all of those people. But I talked to the Ozanam Inn, and they said not Ozanam, Salvation Army got maybe 15 people. They had room for 100 people to come in. Ozanam Inn was going to make capacity for 30 extra beds, and the director there said he maybe expected 3 or 4. So a lot of the people under the bridge, one of the things is going to the shelters, there's strict rules, you have to be in by 5, and so a lot of the people just figure, we're just going to stay out in the street.
Well, that was my point. They didn't necessarily get off the street. They might have moved from that one location, but all of them didn't necessarily go to these shelters. So where are these individuals going?
Well, so some, there was the sickest of the sick. I mean, a lot of people have mental illnesses. I talked to a guy who had a broken leg. He just got a back surgery. So I think those organizations like Unity will actually find them permanent supportive housing. But there's already another small little encampment at Camp Street in Calliope. There's about a dozen tents. And it's going to grow. I mean, but it's not like this large sort of open area place. There's the on and off ramp, so you can't really have a huge encampment there. But I mean, they'll find other places to camp out. But the city said they're going to actually barricade that one section, because every other year or so you get one of these huge encampments there. And I think the city's at the point where they're going to close it off and people won't even be able to park there.
There does seem to be an increase in the activity, at least the begging activity at street corners now. There just seems to be more of it. Is it, or is it documented, or does it just seem that way?
No, I mean, because, when I was living in Treme, definitely I would see a lot more people on the corners. It seems like there were a lot more young white people, a lot more, middle-aged white people who were on the corners begging. Some of those might be what they call gutter punks, but we haven't really looked too closely at that so far as who are the people, whether it's greater than it has been before. But I think I think you're right, there is a greater presence in certain areas of the city.
And expanding, outside of their usual stomping grounds of CBD, French Quarter. Now you can see them up and down Esplanade, places uptown.
Elysian Fields, Franklin. Those are two of the main.
Lakeview.
Yeah.
Canal Boulevard, right
There you
at
go.
in the shape of the 610.
Now the gutter crowd is usually distinguished by having a dog, isn't it? Isn't that part of the MO?
They do have dogs, yeah.
It's just the gutter crowd, though. You see a lot of folks with dogs.
Well, actually, and I think one of the
all
things
walks.
with the gutter crowd, they actually have the dogs because it's actually safety. Because if they're in like a squat, and the dog will hear something, they'll bark. And there's sort of this myth that people thought that they would have dogs because the cops wouldn't arrest them, but they have kennels, so that will not prevent the police from arresting these kids.
Well, one last question. Is the city getting a hold of this? Are they getting a hold of this,
Well,
this homeless
honestly,
problem?
the homeless problem has increased by an unbelievable amount. Right now, on any given night, there are 2,000 people who are either in shelters or on the street. That's down 83% since 2007. So, and there's only now 200 veterans who are on the streets, and the mayor wants to eliminate that by find them housing by the end of this year. So, the city's it's probably one of the most successful cities so far as tackling homelessness right now.
Okay, Richard, thanks a lot. Errol, somebody else has thrown their hat into the lieutenant governor's race this week.
Yeah, the state elections aren't until October, a year from now, but about a year from now would be qualifying, and so that kind of pulls a little trigger in people's minds about it's time to start thinking about campaigns. And the governor's race, people look at it, and David Vitter seems like it's going to be pretty strong in there, but there's people maybe saying my best chance is to go and Jay Darden, the lieutenant governor, is running for governor, and so because the lieutenant governor is running, there's going to be a vacancy in the lieutenant governor's race, so people are seeing some possibility there. Actually, historically, look, anybody who runs for lieutenant governor wants to be governor, but historically it has never been a stepping stone, except for Kathleen Blanco, that she's the only person in modern times to go from lieutenant governor to governor by being elected. Now, Errol long succeeded to it when there was a vacancy, but it has never, ever been a stepping stone for the governor. So if that's somebody's motivation for running for the office, they don't have history on their side. Nevertheless, John Young, who's the parish president, announced this week, Billy Nungesser, who's the parish president of Plaquemines Parish, has already announced. So you have two area parish presidents running. And in Baton Rouge, Kip Holden has been talking about running. Jefferson Parish is a real power base for state politics. The nature of its politics is Republican conservative, which is in keeping with most of the state. But Jefferson Parish is right at this nexus where you got Orleans Parish and St. Tammany Parish, and so it is in the most populous and the most popular media center in the state. And so being from Jefferson Parish for statewide politics is a good boost. And it's not inconceivable that if Vitter's elected governor and John Young's elected lieutenant governor, that both of those top two officials would be for Jefferson Parish. And so it's a good place to be from. The sort of curious thing about the lieutenant governor's race or the office is that it was patterned after the vice president of the United States, that you're there, for succession. You really don't need to have a lieutenant governor. It's not like, whose finger is going to be on the nuclear trigger, that sort of thing. You can go 3 or 4 days without a governor and you're not really losing anything. In some states, make the Secretary of State, next in line of succession. But Louisiana, like most states, patterned after the United States government. But the fact is, the lieutenant governor's office, as it was originally designed, doesn't have much to do except to check on the governor's health. And so in 1974, when they created the new Constitution, they put the lieutenant governor in charge of tourism and economic development, which is sort of curious because being lieutenant governor doesn't necessarily qualify you for that, but if you run for that office, pretty much what you have to talk about is what you can do for tourism and
marketing Louisiana.
Yeah. And so that's what those people have had to do. They've had to really become marketers and sell themselves in that way.
Okay, so we have John Young in there now too, president of Jefferson Parish, as well as Billy Nungesser and Kip Holden.
And the real kid guy is Kip Holden, because Kip Holden he's from Baton Rouge. He's a Democrat. He's black, but he's popular among blacks and whites in that area. So if he runs, he pretty much has a ticket into a runoff, and so it would be a good chance of one of those people versus Kip Holden in the runoff.
All righty, thanks a lot, Errol. Mike, over to you now, and some interesting goings on over at juvenile court, in terms of who's occupying seats over there, Judge Yolanda King is not working as a juvenile judge because the Supreme Court had suspended her. Explain why.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting in the seats that are not occupied in her case. And this is really shaping up to be a pretty juicy battle, maybe far beyond the recognition of that court and its judges, simply because Yolanda King, now suspended after being criminally charged with lying about her residency when she qualified and won that seat in a major upset. She had been a perennial candidate who ran several times for different judgeships. And usually those people just kind of get written off as wannabes, but surprised the political establishment on almost no money, maybe 1/20th of her major opponent, somehow knocked on enough doors, won that election, and was promptly challenged that she lied about her residency. So she's facing criminal charges. That's enough to get her suspended by the state Supreme Court. But she's fighting this tooth and nail. And she also has the sort of activist, grassroots, both community and legal supporters to back her up. In two instances, one in fighting the criminal charge, but now Mitchell Andrews filed a lawsuit being heard in Baton Rouge on Monday to keep that seat off of the ballot. There was a law passed by the legislature to reduce that court from 6 to 4, pushed by Landrieu, arguing that there are more judges than there is work. It's time to save money, reduce those judgeships. But she's and her supporters are saying, hey, innocent until proven guilty, I should have the right to run again. And other people who are would-be opponents want to see that seat on the ballot, and it looks like the Secretary of State, Tom Shedler, also wants to keep that on the ballot.
Because it is on the ballot. He has left it on the ballot.
He's left it on the ballot, but there's the legal challenge that will be heard Monday. So we'll see if that is allowed to remain on the ballot. But no matter how this goes in court, both in criminal court and Monday in Baton Rouge civil court, it's going to go all the way to the state Supreme Court, where whole kinds of civil rights and Voting Rights Act issues are at stake.
So it's not going to be settled before the November primary, put it that way.
Probably not, but that's why there's going to be emergency writs. I mean, if the city loses Monday, look for them, because qualifying starts Wednesday.
Like someone who's observed a crime scene, are there too many seats on that court?
Well, those judges spend the least number of days on the bench, probably of any judge in any court in the city. And that's saying a lot because we have some underworked judges. However, the juvenile court judges say they do a lot of things outside of the court in community outreach and other programs. That's hard to get a measure of that, but I think that BGR, other good government groups have shown that the workload there is light.
Their caseload is way down, and there will be one less judge. We do know that for sure.
Right.
At juvenile
There's
court
a retirement
by the end of the year because of the
Judge
retirement
Lawrence
of Judge
Lagarde. So we're going to 6 to 5. It's going to be a battle royal over that
right.
That additional seat.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Talk about another battle. Who's going to control John Mack and John McDonough School? The Bessie this week denied Orleans Parish from taking control of it. Is that correct? Explain further.
Right. So the John McDonough High School on Esplanade was one of the 100 schools that the state took over after Hurricane Katrina because it had been terrible for years. And since then, so the 9 years since then, the state has run it and the state has chartered it out. And in both cases, I mean, last year it had a performance score of 9.3 on a 150-point scale.
Not good. Not
Terrible.
Good. So it's closed down now.
So
right?
it's closed down at the moment. It's going to be vacant for at least 2 years while the state renovates it to the tune of at least $40 million. And the community around the school, the alumni, former teachers, have been very involved for a long time. And what they are now saying is the state takeover failed for this school. You didn't turn it around. Give it back to the local school board. And Orleans Parish School Board passed a resolution in July saying we want the school back. And the question is, who has the right to make that decision? And it appears to be that the Recovery School District itself and the state superintendent make that without the school board at the state level that people think oversees them. And they're arguing over that. But so this week, Bessie decided once again that they were not going to give the school back. And they also, to Orleans. But what they did do, and they felt like they were completely within their legal bounds to make this decision, is RSD had already announced that they were going to do a community process to decide what happens to the school next. And maybe that will involve giving it back to Orleans Parish. And the state board said that that process had to be led by the Orleans Parish School Board, that the RSD has to kind of take a back seat. And part of that is about the state board doesn't trust that the Orleans Parish School Board is going to do a good job with the school either.
So will renovations continue with the school?
Renovations are going to continue, yes.
Okay. All right, thanks a lot, Danielle. All right, time to look ahead. Errol.
Good. If you on Broad Street, where the new Whole Food is, if you go there, there's some empty space right as you walk in for all kind of feel-good activities. And one of them is the Culinary Center, which is being operated by Tulane University. It's going to be opening in a few weeks. And what it is to teach med students about healthy cooking, so they in turn, as they become doctors, can teach their patients about healthy cooking. And so it'll be done on the premise right next to the Whole Food, and really an exciting activity.
All right,
and the med school likes to say that they're leading the way in doing this sort of thing.
Great. Richard?
There are 50 state troopers that were brought in after the Bourbon Street shooting. They leave the day after Labor Day. A collection of Bourbon Street businesses got together, raised money to put an extra 213 hours of manpower on the streets for detailed police officers. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Great. Danielle?
Well, in the next 2 weeks, the state superintendent finally has to put out some kind of plan about what tests the 3rd through 8th graders are going to be taking in April. The school year's already begun, so I'm looking forward to hearing what that's going to be.
We are too. Thanks, Danielle. Mike?
All right, I'm going to go against the popular sports buzz. Everyone's looking at the Saints. They play their preseason game tonight. But before Drew Brees takes field for that season opener against the Falcons, the other New Orleans sports superstar, Anthony Davis, will be playing for Team USA in the World Cup, World Championship of Basketball. And, he is expected not just to be a starter, but to be a leader of that USA squad.
Wonderful, good news. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you all for joining us so much. And of course, we hope to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.